The film immediately plunged into the fractured psyche of Ronnie, the crew's veteran leader. The opening moments featured his unsettling internal monologue, where he confessed to himself that he had committed an act so atrocious, so fundamentally terrible, that it was utterly beyond the pale and irreparable. His muttered thoughts revealed a deep-seated weariness, lamenting that after 30 years in the life, he was simply running on empty and could not carry the burden any longer. Moving on from this private distress, Ronnie was seen meeting with Harold Lang, the slick, soft-spoken lieutenant for the powerful but unseen mob boss, Mr. Reynolds. The purpose of their clandestine meeting was to hash out the details for an upcoming bank robbery commissioned by Mr. Reynolds, who, for reasons of his own, never appeared in person. Harold Lang revealed that Ronnie would be leading a team composed of other individuals handpicked by the boss. Ronnie's long tenure in the criminal world, which included a stint in prison, was precisely why Mr. Reynolds had called him off the bench. He was valued for his rare qualities of trustworthiness and unwavering adherence to orders. The scene then transitioned directly to the robbery in progress. Ronnie was carrying out the heist alongside two other men, namely Grady and Royce. Grady was immediately established as a terrifyingly volatile, loose cannon with a hair-trigger temper and a barbaric streak. Royce, by contrast, was introduced as the youngest member of the crew and a notably obedient follower. During the robbery, a suspicious sound prompted Grady to investigate, where he found a security guard attempting to secretly call the police. True to his reputation, Grady completely went off the reservation, brutally and relentlessly smashing the man's face until he was grievously wounded. Ronnie rushed over to check the commotion. Upon finding Grady had crossed the line and jeopardized the entire operation with his psychotic savagery, Ronnie reprimanded him, administering a sharp physical cuff as a clear, yet surprisingly muted, punishment for the overreaction that stemmed from the younger man's impulsive nature. Leaving the scene of the crime, the trio made their escape, with the young Royce driving the getaway vehicle. The sound of police sirens approaching and passing by clearly put the wind up him, and he was frantic with panic. The seasoned Ronnie, however, maintained his composure and coolly used his experience to gauge exactly how far they had to go before the car became too hot to handle. Royce kept up a nervous stream of questions, constantly asking for their destination, when suddenly their escape was violently interrupted. They had struck a pedestrian on the road. Despite the crash, Ronnie made a cold, immediate decision to press on, though he did take a moment to look back and register the person they had hit. Their reckless journey eventually brought them to a prearranged rendezvous where they met Numbers, the crew's accountant, who had been dispatched by Mr. Reynolds to manage the next phase. Upon meeting, the initial priority was to quickly and thoroughly cover their tracks. They set fire to the old getaway car and incinerated all the clothing worn during the heist. But the unfortunate necessity of ditching their weapons left them vulnerable. Numbers then laid out Mr. Reynolds' plan. The four of them were to lay low for a short period in an isolated hideout until the authorities' intense scrutiny had cooled off. Only then would they be allowed to leave, and the massive loot would be divided. The hideout, a remote cottage, turned out to be less than desirable. It was run down, dirty, and barely habitable, but despite their complaints, the men had no choice but to swallow their pride and settle in. Numbers, who was now in charge of safeguarding the money, firmly reiterated the boss's standing order. Under no circumstances were they to leave the cottage until a direct, explicit instruction came from Mr. Reynolds. He estimated that this mandatory cabin fever would last for approximately 1 week. Once the initial sorting of gear was complete, Ronnie and Royce started to eat, pointedly excluding Grady. Meanwhile, Numbers immediately retreated upstairs, used his stash, and got stoned pretty quickly. Grady soon appeared, noticeably miffed that he hadn't been invited to the table. Ronnie was having none of it, coldly stressing that they were strangers who didn't know each other, and, fundamentally, he had no love lost for Grady due to his savagery during the robbery. Ronnie brought up the incident with the security guard, making it clear that Grady's bloodlust had utterly compromised the plan and that he never wanted to cross paths with him again after this job was over. With the tension now thick enough to cut with a knife, the men woke up on the second day and began to settle into their separate, strained routines. A quiet segment that was then jarringly interrupted by a flashback, pulling the narrative back to the moment Grady was initially recruited by Harold. The brief flashback was just a quick reminder. Harold had explicitly told Grady to fall in line and do what Ronnie said. Back at the remote dump, the three were trying to eat, and Grady was at it again. He was trying to be all chill, but the chat was weird. He started saying the cottage gave him a serious case of the jitters, reminding him of his aunt's village, which he swore was totally jinxed. Royce, the young gun, was eating it up, so he asked Grady to spill the tea on why it was cursed. Grady didn't need any more convincing and launched into a gnarly tale about the village's dark past. Ronnie, who was a veteran and not born yesterday, just gave a massive sigh of disbelief. Grady just gave him a look, hitting him with a killer line, saying just because he can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. Luckily, numbers showed up, and they all started tossing him back. Before the night turned into a blur, Grady threw out that he felt like he knew numbers from somewhere. Ronnie was quick to put the kibosh on that, saying they'd probably just been bumping elbows in the same crime circles, working for the same boss. Later on, Ronnie was trying to focus on his book, a proper doorstop of a classic, but Numbers was making a racket upstairs, clearly off his face on something. Ronnie had to march up there and read the guy the riot act. He found Royce was absolutely blitzed. The kid was so hammered he passed out cold right in the toilet and didn't move until morning. By the third day, the whole week was starting to crawl by, and the guys had their miserable routines down cold. Grady was permanently on the lash and winding everyone up. Numbers was locked away upstairs, chasing his next high, and Ronnie was doing his best to keep his head down with his book. Royce was officially off the rails, going pint for pint with Grady. The close quarters were a pressure cooker, and on the sixth day, things went spectacularly pear-shaped. After Royce finished up, he managed to smash the porcelain of the toilet. The leak was disgusting and wouldn't stop, pouring through the floor and drenching the dinner table. Grady's attempts to fix the mess were a total foul-up. Now all four of them were stuck with a nasty bucket catching the overflow, making their pathetic hideout feel even more like a prison cell. The situation inside the cottage was rapidly growing critical. They had been holed up for nearly a full week. The food supplies were critically low, and Mr. Reynolds had yet to ring them up with new instructions. This vacuum of information and the grinding isolation began to seriously mess with their heads. Royce, the young buck, started entertaining dangerous thoughts, figuring the boss might have been nicked by the police. He suggested that if that was the case, they should just cut their losses, split the massive pile of cash, and leg it in 4 different directions. Ronnie, though, was cut from old cloth. He remained fiercely loyal to the unseen boss and was convinced that there was a solid reason, a master plan, behind the silence. Grady naturally didn't give a toss about their loyalty issues. His only concern was the rapidly shrinking food stash. He loudly argued that they would be starving to death if they didn't take action, especially with the whole house starting to stink to high heaven because of the broken plumbing. Initially, Ronnie tried to get Numbers to take one for the team and go straight to the boss to get the lay of the land, but the proposal was shut down instantly, as everyone, including Numbers himself, was terrified of breaking Mr. Reynolds' ironclad rule. No one was allowed to leave the premises. Just when they were truly at their wits' end, on the 7th day, a woman named C unexpectedly showed up at the cottage door, claiming to be an envoy sent directly by the boss. Ronnie immediately tried to get the lowdown, asking what Mr. Reynolds was thinking, but C was strictly on a need-to-know basis. She admitted she hadn't met the boss face-to-face and was only there to take stock of their needs. After noting down their dwindling provisions, C promised to return soon and quickly took off. Before she left, however, Ronnie pleaded with her to relay the grim reality of their situation back to Mr. Reynolds, hoping the boss would understand their mounting anxiety and give them a break. Later that evening, Ronnie had a heart-to-heart with Royce. He opened up about the heavy regrets he carried from his 3 decades of living a life of crime, telling the young man that he genuinely wished he could take it all back. With a genuine plea, he strongly suggested that Royce should get his act together while he was still young. He made it clear that after this job was finished and the money was secured, Royce needed to turn over a new leaf, get out of the crime life for good, and start living on the straight and narrow. On the 8th day of the forced lock-in, things took a sharp downturn when the power started flickering. This immediately sent Grady's already unhinged mind into a total tailspin. He figured the signs were clear. Mr. Reynolds was about to pull the rug out from under them, planning to take them out and reclaim the cash. Ronnie, however, was staying the course, completely unwilling to believe the boss would stab them in the back. Seeing that his paranoia wasn't sticking, Grady deliberately went low blow, trying to bait Ronnie by talking smack about forcing himself on C when she returned. That threat was like waving a red flag at a bull for Ronnie, as C reminded him of his own daughter. The tension finally boiled over into a nasty physical fight. Absolutely livid, Ronnie tried to get Numbers to step up and help manage the situation. Numbers was having none of it, giving a weak excuse about being ill, when in reality he was just too high as a kite to bother lifting a finger. The men were then forced to sit around the dinner table, where Grady was bound and gagged, his face a mess of bruises and blood. Even in chains, Grady was still fighting. He launched a verbal grenade, revealing he'd done his homework and knew Numbers was a wanted criminal he'd seen in the papers. Grady's core warning was simple. They'd be sitting ducks if they let a crook like Numbers hold on to the score, especially since the accountant had the only set of car keys. He demanded that Ronnie immediately confiscate the haul. Though Grady's argument was logically sound, Ronnie dug his heels in. He flat out refused, sticking to his belief that since Mr. Reynolds had made the call to use Numbers, then Numbers must be trusted, period. Later, Ronnie, visibly worn out, asked Royce to keep watch over Grady. The sociopath wasted no time, working on Royce's head. He started by sharing his belief that there was no master in the sky. From there, he painted a terrifying picture, convincing Royce that they needed to make their move now. His plan was brutal. They were about to be left for dead. Numbers was going to bolt with the money, and Ronnie was the only obstacle in the road. The quickest way out, in Grady's cold estimation, was to just ice Ronnie first. The deadly trap was sprung in the darkest hour of the night. Royce woke Ronnie up with a fabricated story, claiming some emergency had gone down. Ronnie, already on edge, immediately rushed out to investigate, and that was all the time the two conspirators needed. Royce and Grady successfully ambushed and overpowered Ronnie, leaving the veteran thief helpless and out of the game. Their next move was simple: grab the cash locked away with Numbers. Grady, pumped up and moving fast, went straight to Numbers' room. Numbers wasn't caught flat-footed. He was holding a pistol, despite carrying weapons being strictly off-limits per the boss's rules. Ignoring the threat, Grady tried to force his way in. Numbers, pushed way past his breaking point and backed into a corner, fired the weapon. Though the shot only winged Grady's leg, it was enough to make Numbers panic and toss the piece away. Even with his leg bleeding, Grady didn't skip a beat. He grabbed a nearby axe and, in a sickening act of violence, brought it down on Numbers' hand, nearly severing it. The piercing, guttural screams coming from Numbers' room finally jolted Ronnie back to full awareness. Lying there, helpless, he was consumed by a blinding wave of regret, realizing his worst fear. Royce had sided with Grady, the exact same unhinged brute Ronnie had warned him was a snake in the grass. With Numbers incapacitated, Grady told Royce to go fetch the loot while he focused on moving the car. As Royce went to collect the money, he was stopped dead in his tracks by the sight of Numbers, who was now laughing in a terrifyingly psychotic, manic way. Meanwhile, Grady went to the spot Numbers had indicated for the car keys, but he'd been suckered in. It was a nasty booby trap that sliced his hand open. Returning to the main room, Grady was now in a world of pure, selfish fury. Seeing his chance, he immediately plunged a knife into Royce, coldly betraying the only person who had helped him and leaving the young gun for dead. Royce's fate was sealed the moment he turned his back on Ronnie's warning and bought into Grady's destructive game. Grady's motivation for this final, brutal act was crystal clear. He simply wanted the entire score for himself, with no partners left to muscle in on his reward. Consumed by the desire to tie up loose ends, Grady went back to check on the incapacitated Ronnie. That proved to be a fatal mistake. Ronnie immediately came out swinging and launched a desperate attack from the blind spot. Grady was not going down without a fight and tried to push back against the veteran thief. Ronnie finally managed to plunge a blade into Grady, but even then, the madman wasn't immediately finished. Just when Ronnie was up against the ropes, something unbelievable happened. Royce, who had been left for dead, crawled back into the fight. The young man used his last ounce of strength to shoot Grady, taking the psycho out instantly. At that very moment, the dilapidated cottage, now soaked in blood and drugs, finally caught fire due to the chaos they had wrought, and the inferno began to quickly spread. Ronnie, grievously wounded but alive, managed to drag himself out and slumped against a nearby tree. Royce, his job done, lost his battle with massive blood loss and slipped away into unconsciousness. It was then that C returned to the horrific scene. She didn't bat an eye at the carnage, the fire, or the dead and dying men. Ronnie, completely at his limit, managed to ask her what the final message from the boss was. C confirmed the order was simple. Mr. Reynolds wanted them to stay put, right there, with their colleagues. Ronnie weakly countered that all of his colleagues were dead. C shrugged off the tragic news, explaining that this was precisely the way things were supposed to go. As C started to make a break for it, Ronnie demanded to know the true purpose of her presence. The shocking truth was then laid bare for all to see. C revealed herself to be the pedestrian they had hit with the getaway car, confirming the collision had snuffed out her life instantly. The ultimate mind-bending reality then hit with the force of a wrecking ball. They had all died in various ways connected to the heist. Everything they had experienced in the isolated cottage, the paranoia, the breakdown, the violence and the murder, had not taken place in the real world. It was the perpetual story of their afterlife, an eternal torment unfolding in limbo. This chilling final reveal established that the four criminals were trapped in a state of eternal uncertainty, a purgatory for their wicked souls. In this metaphysical hell, the unseen Mr. Reynolds was depicted as a powerful demon, the ultimate entity of temptation and evil. Meanwhile, the victim who appeared as C was revealed to be the embodiment of destiny or karma, or perhaps even vengeful angels administering their final, inescapable judgment. The criminals, doomed by their own choices, were forever trapped in that loop of violence and paranoia, paying the eternal price for their deeds.